They don't want it. Adam Silver can't make them want it. Apparently, I haven't really talked to anybody, Stephen A., maybe you have in the union. I know former union leaders who are completely turned off by the All-Star game. Not All-Star weekend, the All-Star game.
No lie, I've watched probably the intro and at least the first quarter of every All-Star game from like the 70s up until like the late 90s.
The steal by Pippen. Hardaway for Jones. And Elliott on the front line. The steal by Peyton Ewing got a piece of it. Stay with it. 4-point lead for the East. Hardaway off the steal. Chased by Kidd, who just checked back in. Hardaway spinning his way and hit it.
The intensity the older generation been talking about. I don't know if I've seen it.
Hill delivering to...
When looking at NBA All-Star Weekend, what the event should be about is the fans, the paying customers, and giving back to the people who make the NBA what it is. In many past eras, that was the big-time theme around all these events. The best players, the marquee stars, would show up and show out to give back to the fans. Basketball back then treated the fans as the most important part. Looking at basketball today, that's really far from the case. And looking at a lot of star players, they almost act like they're better than the fans, better than the NBA. And one of the biggest issues is fans complaining about the All-Star game not being taken seriously.
Whoever else said, all right, y'all, come on, we finna lace them up. Let's get it.
Like a really ball, though.
I'm blaming
It's Steph's fault.
It's Steph's fault, because he come out there
They blame
half court, bro. I mean, because we look at Luka Doncic and Nikola Jokic now. Let's go back and look at what they do in the All-Star game. Is that competition?
That right there is Kevin Durant blaming guys like Steph Curry, Jokic, and Luka at the All-Star game for the event not being taken seriously. Now looking at those guys, do they play a part in it? Of course they do. Everyone does. But someone like Steph Curry is the one guy in the NBA you want shooting a ton of threes. Looking at Luka and Jokic when they came onto the scene, the All-Star game was already dead. And those guys being foreigners, what they did was follow your lead, an example you set. Unfortunately for them, the example you set was a bad one of an uncompetitive All-Star game that became a joke.
The last couple of weeks, no lie, I've watched probably the intro and at least the first quarter of every All-Star game from like the 70s up until like the late 90s. And I wanted to see what the big deal was and if it was really that much intensity like a Game 7 like y'all said it was back then, and it wasn't.
So stopping Durant right there very quickly, in that clip what he says is watch All-Star games of the past, the 70s, 80s, late 90s, and compare them to the current product. And what KD says specifically is he watched the intros and the first quarters. Now first off, Kevin Durant, if you watch film, kudos to you. But secondly, watching the entrances and first quarters is kind of suspect. And why he did that, I think, is pretty obvious. In the first quarter of every basketball game, regular season, playoffs, All-Star games, it's always a feel-out quarter, the least competitive quarter of the game.
That's true.
Now with that being said, looking at the past product versus the current product, just comparing first quarters, I still think it's night and day. Today's games are basically a layup line, nobody playing defense. Back in those first quarters, it was at least basketball that resembled the sport. That's the big-time difference.
Elijah Wan of the Rockets, Charles Barkley of the Suns, Sean Kemp of the Sonics. Hardaway off the steal. Here's Hill. And here comes Jordan going behind the back on Kidd. Hardaway back for Jordan. West has won 3 of the last 4.
The 81 that he gave the last time we heard him say it. Golf. But you see those two guys right there, and both of them really sweating. That tells you that they came out and worked that third quarter. Shaquille O'Neal and Michael Jordan.
Now stopping that right there very quickly. That was a third quarter All-Star game from 1996. The Eastern Conference took that third quarter very, very seriously. And compared to the first quarter, it was much more intense. If you go back and actually watch the film, every All-Star game isn't an all-time classic, a great game. But what you will find is that it at least looks like basketball and resembles the sport. The first quarter of that game was kind of a feel-out quarter, guys still playing hard. The third quarter was legit basketball, we're going to win this game. Look at the Eastern Conference players when they went to the bench. They were drenched in sweat. They were legitimately tired. In today's All-Star games, if one guy breaks a sweat, you're surprised. That is the big-time difference. Now speaking of competition, if you look at All-Star game history, the highest scoring games, take a wild guess when those happened. Well, you guessed it, in the past decade, the last 15 years. Look at the top 6 times teams cracked 180 points. All of those years came in the past decade. In 2024, an abysmal 211 points, the most ever in All-Star game history. That game in 2024 was so bad, so trash, they scrapped the entire 48-minute format and went to a 3-team round robin, which is also equally bad.
The intensity the older generation been talking about, I don't know if I seen it, you know. It was really that much intensity, like a Game 7, like y'all said it was back then, and it wasn't.
So stopping Durant right there very quickly. When it comes to his overall argument, his crusade of saying older All-Star games weren't competitive, weren't intense, what did he say specifically? The intensity wasn't like Game 7. That is a key point for Kevin Durant and a straw man argument. Myself, older NBA fans, and people on YouTube have never said current-day players should treat it like Game 7. What we've said very clearly and very often is that current players should at least play basketball and maybe break a sweat.
Michael, the West has won 3 of the last 4 All-Star games. Are you ready to put your stamp on this game and not turn this thing over to the young guys?
Yeah, I think it's time for us to get ourselves back on track, especially the East. I mean, it's been a while since we won, and I know from what I've heard in the locker room thus far, no one wants to lose this game.
I'm just going to go out and play hard. We're just going to try to win. Like Kenny said, it's a new team. We got a new bunch of guys, and I think we're going to win today too.
Back in the Alamo City, the East over the West of the NBA All-Star game. Shaquille O'Neal, the high point man, with 25. Michael Jordan with 20.
I'll repeat this for the 1000th time. NBA stars back then were not playing at Game 7 intensity. But what they were doing was playing with more intensity than players currently are. That's the big-time divide I think Kevin Durant does not want to admit. Guys back then simply played harder. Guys today, for whatever reason, do not. He's not completely wrong. Now one thing I do want to touch on when it comes to KD's argument, looking at it chronologically, first it was Steph Curry who ruined the game. Secondly, it was the Europeans, Jokic and Doncic. And now what do we hear? The All-Star game was always terrible. Those 3 arguments cannot coexist. Because look at the word ruined. To ruin something means it had to have been great or at least good at one point. If you're saying it was always trash, then nobody could have ruined it. But what this comes back to is Kevin Durant not wanting to admit the truth. The old school eras, in one aspect, were actually better. Now speaking of the old school eras, one thing they were far superior at was passing the torch to the next era. The 1980s, guys like Dr. J and Kareem passed the torch to Magic and Bird, after them to someone like Jordan, then Kobe, Duncan, and so on. The NBA torch gets passed from one era to the next with the standard remaining relatively high. The All-Star game standard didn't really slip until post-Kobe's prime around 2013 or 2014. That right there is not a coincidence. When it comes to basketball, leadership matters. The commissioner matters, sure. But we're talking about the players, the best player, the best leader. They set the tone for the entire game and the entire league. So that's it for the video. And I'll say one last thing. What the NBA needs right now is a positive tone setter who puts their foot down and says what we're currently doing is not going to fly any longer. Look around the NBA, those guys are few and far between. The one guy who might do it is Victor Wembanyama. But the question remains, will players actually follow him in his 4th NBA season? As always, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.